let's go ahead and look at some of these questions here out of our homework. And we're going to start with question number 1. Now, all of these are a little bit different. They're all factoring by grouping and factoring down these trinomials. But we're going to start here with question number 1. And for question number 1, the first thing we do, and this is out of 5 too, the first thing that we do is we see if we can factor something out. So we start with this. We've got 42m squared plus 61mn plus 14n squared. So the first thing that we do is we look and we see if we can factor out a number that's in common. Now, I don't think there's going to be a number in common on this one. Why not? Well, because that 61 here, that's an odd number. And these other two are even, so 2 doesn't go in here. The other choice would be 7, and 7 doesn't go into that 61. So nothing else will factor out, I don't believe. Nope, 7 won't go in there. So what do? Okay, here's the procedure for these. We always take the first number times the last number. So first times the last. And write that number in the box over here. And that's going to be 42 times 14. And that's 588. Now, this one has larger numbers. What we want to first do is we first want to talk about the signs. So when I talk about the signs, what are they going to be? Are they going to be different, or are they going to be the same? Well, what's the sign in the middle here? Okay, the sign in the middle is positive, right? And what about the sign in the box here? This one is what? Positive. Now, what do we know about the sign in the box here? If this is positive, that means they are either both positive or both negative. So since this is positive, they're either both positive or both negative. Now, what do we know about the sign in the middle again? That's positive, so we need these to be what? Positive. Do you see how I figured that out? If this would have been negative, then what do we know? One is positive, one is what? Negative. So in this case, it's positive, so we know they're both positive. Why? Because the sign in the middle was positive. If that would have been negative, these would both be negative. It's just remembering the patterns here. So now we have 588. Okay, now where do I begin? I need two numbers that multiply together to give you that 588. Add together to give you 61. Now, where do I begin? 588 is an even number, and it's a pretty big even number. So let's start off with 4. We could do 2, but let's see if 4 goes in here. Okay. 4 and 147. Well, that's still far away from 61. So let's try now. It's 588. So let's try an 8. 8 doesn't work. How about a 6? 6 and 98. Okay, we're getting closer, so we need to keep going up. How about we try a 12? 12 and 49. Does that work? 12 plus 49 is what? 61. So what are my two numbers? 49 and 12. I always write the larger number first, smaller number below it. Now, how can I check? Well, 49 times 12 is that 588 that I need. And also 49 plus 12 is that 61 that's in the middle here. You see the pattern. We'll do some more of these so you can see how they work. Now what do? All right, we now have our two numbers, so we split it up. So we break this up into 42m squared, and we take the 61 And we break that up into 49 mn and 12 mn. And then we have a 14 n squared left on the end. Now, what do we do from here? Well, how many terms do we now have? We now have 4 terms. So how do we handle 4 terms? We handle 4 terms by factoring, by grouping. So the first 2 pieces, can anyone tell me what I would factor out of here? 42 and a 49. What do they have in common? We think about 49. What's the factors of 49? 7 and 7, right? That's it. So does 7 go into that 42? It does. So the only thing that I can take out is a 7, number-wise. And these both have the variable m as well. So I'm going to factor out a 7m. And then we take our 42, and we divide that by 7. So that gives you then a 6. We take an m out. So that leaves you then with a 6m. 49 divided by 7, well, that's a 7. And we have the n left over with it. Now we repeat the process here on the next 2. Okay, and what can come out of the next 2 here? Well, 12 and 14, they're both even numbers. I can take out a 2. How do I know what to do? What do I need? 6. 12 divided by 6 is what? 2. So that comes out there. These have an n as well. So then 12 divided by 2, well, that's a 6m. See how it matches. And 14 divided by 2, well, that leaves you with a 7. And we took out one of the n's, so that leaves you with a 7n. Are my parentheses exactly the same here? Yes. If they are not, you made a mistake. So what comes out? 6m plus 7n. Gone, gone. What's left over? 7m, plus 2n. Next, let's look at question 7. Question 7 is a little bit different, and it's actually a little bit easier. And question 7 is a negative x squared minus 2x plus 24. Now, the very first thing that we need to do, if it begins with a negative here, if it begins with a negative, you always want to factor that out. So that negative comes out, and that leaves you then with an x squared plus 2x minus 24. So if it begins with a negative, you need to factor out the negative first. We're going to put the 1 here in front. And 1 times a negative 24. 1 times a negative 24. That's a minus 24. This is negative. So since it's negative, that means that one number is positive, one number is negative. And then we look in the middle. Positive goes first because it's the larger one. Negative is down below. Now, we need 2 numbers that do what? Multiply together to give you 24. In this case, since they are different signs, subtract to give you 2. Does anybody know what 2 numbers we can use here? Well, let's start with our 24. What are the factors of 24? 24 is an even number, so we'll start with 2. 2 and 12. Well, that difference is 10. What do we need? 2. Doesn't work. 24, let's try a 4. 4 and 6. That difference is 2, isn't it? So what do we need? Positive 6, negative 4. Now, the good thing about this one is because this is a 1 here, you can jump directly to your factors. And so that's going to be an x plus 6, x minus 4, and you bring down your negative, and there's your final. finished answer. We can skip factor by grouping because of the 1 here. Whenever you have a 1 in front, it makes it much, much easier to factor. Question 8. A little bit different as well. And I don't mind working a lot of these out because you have 25 of them here in this homework. So there's a lot of them to work through. Question 8. Negative 2x squared minus 6x plus 80. So the first thing we look at is we see that this begins with a negative. So that's got to come out. Then I look at the numbers. I have a 2, a 6, and an 80. What number is in common here? What number can I factor out? Does anyone have any idea? I can take a 2 out, can't I? Okay. Now that's going to make it much easier. So we're going to take a 2 out, and we're going to make sure it's negative because it begins with a negative. And now we've got x squared, negative 6 divided by negative 2. Negative and negative makes it a positive 3x there. And lastly, 80 divided by negative 2, that leaves you with a negative 40. There's no number in front of the x squared, so we put the 1 there, and we multiply. 1 times a negative 40 is a negative 40. Since this is negative, that means 1 is positive, 1 number is negative. We go to the middle, so that's positive. So the larger number is positive. Smaller number here is negative. And what 2 numbers are going to work? Well, where do I begin? Okay, we look at 40. Now, what does 40 end in? It ends in a 0. So that tells me I'm going to have a multiple of 10 or 5 in here. So let's start with 10. 40 divided by 10. 4 and 10. Now, 4 and 10, that's a difference of 6, but we need what? 3. So we're fairly close. Let's try 15. 15 doesn't go in there. How about 20? 20 doesn't work, right? Because it's too big. So now let's start looking around. Let's try a 12. 12 doesn't go in there. It's just trial and error. Once you get good at these, it doesn't take long to figure them out. Let's try an 8. 8 and 5. Does that work? Yeah. Okay. So we need a difference of 3. So how about we use a positive 8 and we use a negative 5. It is nothing but trial and error. And I'm purposely taking my time so you'll see how I went through and how I got the process. Once you get good at these, you can look at it and you can see how they factor mentally. Okay? But this one, it ends in a 0. So I know 5s and 10s are going to be the factor. So now that gives you, when I rewrite it, because of the 1 there, that leaves you with an x plus 8, an x minus 5, and I'm going to bring that minus 2 down. We're going to come back and do question 10 at the end, because that I think is the hardest. Again, we're going to work through some more of these, and then I have a group worksheet for us to work through. So we'll come back and do 10 here in a moment. Let's move on and look at 17. And if you need the handout, I will give you that new handout homework packet in just a minute whenever we're all working on our group assignment. Okay, so let's say I give you this to factor. We have 3 terms. First thing I look at is I look to see. These are all even numbers. So 2 can go in there, but always check and make sure nothing larger can go in. So 2 can go into all these. How about 24? How about a 12? 104, let's see if a 12 goes in there. 12 does not. Okay. 24, we know we have a 6 and a 4. So how about, let's try a 6. Does not go into that 104, but let's see if a 4 does. 4 does. Does 80 have a 4 in it? Yes. Does 24 have a 4 in it? Yes. So what's the largest number that I can factor out? 4. Started with 2, right? But you want to make sure you get the biggest one. So 4 will come out, and let's see what's left over. So 24 divided by 4. That leaves you with the 6x squared there. 104 divided by 4, well, that's a minus 26x there. And 80 divided by 4, well, that leaves you with a 20. Now, in some cases, I'll get that ready for you. In some cases, you might look at this and you might say, well, I factored that 4 out, but I might be able to go further, right? And that sometimes happens. Sometimes I see that 4, and then I look, and I broke it down. But let's look. Can I take more out? Yes. What do those still have in common? Can I go again? I think so. Because a 6, a 26, and a 20, what do they have in common? 2. And so what I do is I multiply. Okay, so let's take a 2 out of here. And I've got the 4 out in front. I'm going to multiply it by 2. So let's actually try to take out an 8. And let's see if 8 will work. So 24 divided by 8. 24 divided by 8, that's a 3x squared. 104 divided by 8, that's a minus 13x. And 80 divided by 8, that is a what? Minus 10. Does everyone see what I did here? So I first factored out a 4, and then I said, no, more can come out. Because these are evens. So I took a 2 out. 4 times 2 makes it an 8. The largest that I could factor out is an 8. So this is what we're going to be working with. And now we take the first times the last. First times the last is a negative 30. It is a negative 30. So what do I know? Let's see, did I miss a sign up here? Let's make sure. Yep, I think I did somewhere tonight. Okay, so let's make sure I didn't make a mistake with the signs because it's easy to do. Okay, so we have 24 minus 104 minus 80. And we took out an 8, and that left you with then a 3x squared. Left you with a minus 13. Okay, and then that left you with a, and that should be a minus up here as well. Sorry about that. A minus 10. First times the last, that's a negative 30. Now, we need two numbers that multiply together to give you 30, but have different signs. Right? So that means one is positive, one is negative. A lot of times students make a mistake here because they're not careful. Someone's going to look at this and they're going to say 10 and 3. 10 and 3 is not going to work. Why not? Because these signs have to be what? Opposites. So what do they have to be? Larger one's positive or negative, because the middle's negative, negative and positive. Now, 10 and 3 won't work because if you add them together, you get 13. We're not adding, we are what? Subtracting. So how about 15 and 2? That works because minus 15 times 2 is a minus 30, and minus 15 plus 2 is a minus 13, which is there. You've got to be very careful with the numbers and how they go together. But see, 3 and 10 wouldn't work because when you multiplied them together, you would get positive, and we want negative 30. Now we split up the middle. Why do we have to do that? Because of the 3 here. So that is 3x squared. And then we've got a minus 15x, a positive 2x, and a minus 10. What can I factor out of here? Well, the first two pieces. These are going to have a 3 in common. So we'll take out a 3x, and that leaves you with an x minus 5. Next two pieces, what can come out? 2. So that leaves you then with an x minus 5 as well. These are the same. So that leaves you then with an x minus 5, gone, gone. And 3x plus 2 is left over. And what's out in front of all of it? Don't forget to bring down your 8. Always be very careful about the signs because that makes a big difference. Okay, let's do a couple more of these and then you'll have time to do a worksheet. The worksheet only has 10 questions. So let's look now at question 20. And see what we can do with question 20. Question 20 is a squared times a plus b quantity squared minus ab times a plus b quantity squared minus 20 b squared times a plus b quantity squared. Okay, now, first thing we look at is we ask ourselves, can we factor something out? Yes. Because notice these parentheses are what? Exactly the same, right? So what does that tell me then? That tells me that I can take out an a plus b quantity squared. Is everyone okay with that? Now, what does that leave you with? And I'm going to use brackets because you've got a lot of parentheses just to make it easier. And that leaves you then with an a squared minus ab minus 20b squared. And now we should know what to do because this one's very easy because we have the 1 here. 1 times negative 20 is a negative 20. This is a negative 20 in the box. So that tells me one of them is positive, one of them is negative. Sign in the middle is negative. How about we use a 5 and a what? 5 and 4, right? That'll work, won't it? And since we have a 1, we can jump directly to our factors. So we have an a and an a minus 5, and a plus 4. And what's our ending variable? B and b. So then we bring down our a plus b quantity squared. And that is your final factored, finished answer. They're all a little bit different, but this is getting ready to give you to work on this assignment that I'm getting ready to give you. Okay, question 23. Minus m squared plus 2m plus 35. What would we do here? Well, if I gave you this one and I said factor it, what do I need to do first? This begins with a what? Negative. So, first things first, negative comes out. What does that do? Reverses the signs. So that makes it a minus 2m, right? And a minus 35. First times the last, put the 1 here. First times the last is a minus 35. That's negative, so what does that tell you? 1 positive, 1 negative. Sign in the middle is negative. It ends in a 5. That tells you a 5's got to go in there. How about 7 and 5? Those work because they subtract from each other to give you what? Negative 2. That's what we want. Now, because of the 1, we can jump directly to our factors. M and M, minus 7, positive 5, and bring the negative down. We'll go back and do 10, and then I'll give you this worksheet to work on. A couple more minutes. I'll give you a worksheet. It should not take long to do the worksheet. But let's look at question 25. What should I do first? Well, nothing's in common, but it begins with a negative. So step number 1 is factor out this negative. And we may just skip 10, and that way you can work on the worksheet. So factor out this negative, and that leaves you with a 49x squared, positive 14x, and a negative 15. First times the last makes it a negative. Let's see what that is. 49 times 15, that makes it a minus 735. It is negative, so we know that 1 is positive, 1 is negative, and it ends in a 5. So let's start with a larger number. Let's try 15. You can try 5, but let's try 15. 15 sounds pretty close to me. That gives you 15 and 49, but that's a difference of 34. What do we need? 14. So let's continue, and let's try a, I don't know, how about 35? 35 and 21. 35 minus 21 is what? 14. So we need a positive 35 and a minus 21. How did I get those numbers? I just started working with it, and it ends in a 5. So you try 5, 10, 15, 20. Once you do a lot of these, you kind of know how the patterns work. I said, let's try 35. 35 happened to work. Now we have to, because of that 49, split up that middle. And that's going to be a positive 35x minus 21x and minus 15. What can I factor out of the first two pieces? These have a 7 in common and an x. So that leaves you with a 7x plus 5. The next two pieces, it begins with a negative. We need 21. We have a 7. So 21 divided by 7 is a 3. So I'm going to factor it a minus 3. And that is going to switch my signs. And that leaves you then with a 7x plus 5, which is what we want. Are the groupings the same? Yes, they are. So 7x plus 5 comes out. 7x minus 3 is left over. And what's out in front of all of it is a negative. So I now have a worksheet for you guys to work together on. Okay, you can work together on it. You can ask me questions. I'll pass this out, and